So a couple of housekeeping items. The meeting is going to be recorded, and we'll have the video posted on the BAM's YouTube channel. And we're jumping ahead. We've muted everyone so we can hear our speaker clearly. If you can stay on camera, I always think it's good for the speaker to be able to see our smiling faces instead of black boxes. But again, we know some people are eating and dealing with children and whatever. So, but if you can, stay on camera. We're going to have time for questions and discussion. If you have questions during Holly's presentation, please put them in the chat box, but we're also going to open it up for general discussion after Holly's presentation. So here's what we're going to do tonight. We have Holly from the Florida Policy Institute, and again, having conversation and discussion about some of the issues that she presents to us and strategies that she outlines for us, as well as announcements and opportunities that are before us in the next month. It's my distinct pleasure to be able to introduce Holly Bullard. Again, as Joy mentioned, Holly has a lot of expertise in the healthcare field, but really has her finger on the pulse of a lot of the issues that we care about in addition to health in Tallahassee. She serves right now as Chief Strategy and Development Officer. And in that role, she's responsible for raising money for FPI, but also policy advocacy, coalition building, outreach, and communication. She previously served as education and working family tax credits policy analyst for the organization. Holly has an extensive experience in public policy. She worked for Suncoast United Way prior to coming to FPI. Also has experience working on Capitol Hill in the U.S. Department of Education, as well as United Ways in Arizona. Holly has a master's in public policy from Georgetown and her bachelor's in political science from Emory, where she has been recognized as Emory's University 40 list of distinguished alumni. Congratulations, Holly. The thing most notable on her resume, however, is that she's a proud product of the Pinellas County school system, public school system, and the daughter of Florida public educators. So we know she was raised right and also went through the public school system when Florida supported public education. So that's a good thing. We've asked Holly to forecast, based on her experience in watching the legislature, what's in store for us during the next 60 days of the session, and also to give us some advice on how we can best have an impact on the issue we care about. So with that introduction, Holly, take it away.
Well, thanks, Carol, so much. Appreciate that. The nice words and nice introduction. I would kind of start off to say that I'm not an expert on every issue, and I'm not like deeply involved in every issue in the Capitol. Florida Policy Institute is a fiscal policy institute at heart, so the budget and revenue is very central to what we do, and then offshoots from there. So if you think about our state budget and what makes it up, education and healthcare are the vast majority of that, and then other pieces, criminal justice, responding to worker shortages, labor, economy. Those are some things too, but broadly, there might be some questions that I would might need to find someone else, but I probably know somebody in general. Healthcare is also a major deal this year because it's Senator Pastomo's big focus. With her Live Healthy bill. So I'm fairly adept at that. I know broadly some of the priorities in either chamber is sort of what's happening. And then I'll lift up a couple of things that we're working on at FPI that I think other people are keeping an eye on as well. And then open for questions. And I love to strategize and connive. This is my fun thing that I do. So whatever kind of interesting or if there's something specific that you guys are interested in, I'm always there. And my kiddo might pop in at some point, but I'm not going to apologize for that. I'm not going to, right? So there you go. Okay, so as I mentioned before, so Senate Bill 7016, Nancy and I were talking about that. That is the Live Healthy bill. It's $1 billion health initiative. That is Senator Pastoma's priority this year, and it was actually just passed the committee this morning, which is really interesting because we heard debate to a certain extent around Medicaid expansion. It does not include Medicaid expansion. I can talk for hours about Medicaid expansion for any kind of thought or question you have about it. I would opinion. I would love to converse, and I did update some of the senators around Medicaid expansion because we knew that Senator Thompson was going to offer it as an amendment. And she withdrew it, so they didn't have to vote on it, but they did discuss it. So that was interesting. And given the fiscal impact of the bill, which would be about $700 million to $1 billion, MedEx would have been a great addition to that because Medicaid expansion would save the state money, and then you can also cover people. But that's beside the point because right now we're not going to see MedEx move through the legislature this year. But the bill in general is a workforce focused bill, and it also has a focus on a healthcare workforce, from recruiting people from other states to come to offer loans to different providers so that they can serve different specialties, et cetera. It's a fairly large bill, and there's nothing sort of out of the ordinary that we are opposed to. It also increases the Medicaid reimbursement rate for home and community-based services, which is actually a big deal and needed. And Medicaid rates in general in all fields need to be raised. So that would be my, one piece that I think could be bigger, to be honest, to say, well, actually we should increase Medicaid rate and expand Medicaid, those two things. But in general, I'm not concerned, and I don't know if fighting or even engaging in that is something that's actually good in general. It's a good bill. It just doesn't go far enough for the health of Floridians, but it's not. It is sucking a lot of the oxygen in terms of the work of the Senate. It is, the baby of Senator Pastomo. It is her last session. She had last year her big Live Local bill, which was on affordable housing, and it had some pros and cons in that bill as well. So also very large bill. Senator Pastomo had flagged that for everyone for several months. We've known that she's going to have a Live Healthy bill. We've been working with her and Senator Harrell on a provision on mobile response teams for mental health and drawing down some federal money for that, because we're leaving millions of dollars on the table for mental health, shocker, but it's in there. And so there's good things in there. And so that's really great. I was really hoping that there might be some other shoes to drop too that could be exciting, that could be investments from the state, a little bit broader in mental health, and also around childcare, which I could speak to as well. I think that there will be movement around something around childcare, expanding supports for families. And that's something that we're kind of meddling with and supporting, and from the back scenes trying to understand what's happening and how we can push that forward. And I thought it might have been part of her Live Healthy bill. Like, I think they were tinkering with that. And I don't know, maybe because she couldn't come up with a cute name to like pull it in or something. I don't know. Or it was too expensive. And because then on the other side, we see Speaker Renner. The last week, it's been forever, it feels like, before we understood what his focus was going to be this year. And it seems the last week he said, okay, his HB1, his priority is going to be around restricting social media for kiddos, for under 16-year-olds, which I don't have any bandwidth in my brain because there's so many other things that are really important to really, I don't know. It's like, okay, I don't know. Like, I'm not, to be frank with y'all, it's like, I'm not, other than to say, it's nice that you really care about protecting kids, because on the other hand, there's bills that we're fighting that roll back child labor protection that we're very, very concerned about. So there's that whole like divergence there. But if you go back to the fact that we didn't know for a very long time that Speaker Renner's priority was, it was very interesting, right? There's this difference. We knew for a few months that Senator Pestum wanted to do health, and it's been crickets in the House. In addition, both houses have been filing half as many bills as like last session. If y'all remember last session, day one, they passed Live Local. On day two, they passed universal vouchers of session. That would have been the two things passing this week. And it traumatized a lot of people, me included, sort of just like going through this very intense session in 2023. So 2024 is this sort of opposite end of this, right? Where it's a little slower. Even talking to some of the senators, and they're saying, one, the governor is out of state, he's focusing on other things, and his whole team is also focusing on that. So no one's in their biz trying to tell them what to do, or they haven't been as engaged and peeping over their shoulder. So some people have been like, we don't want to do stuff, and then have them come back and go, no, you're doing this. So there's been this interesting divergence, right, in terms of half as many bills. And you see this, it's just a flood because it's the bill filing deadline, right? If a bill has not been filed now, then it is not filed, right? There is bill filing deadline is first day of session. And so unless it's a terrible amendment, which can happen, right? Like amendments to bills moving, but if it's not there, it's not there. And that's why we were hopeful for our one of the primary bills that we're concerned about, child labor, with HB 49, House Bill 49 with Rep. Cheney. It didn't have a Senate counterpart for the entire committee weeks until Friday before session, and the Senate bill dropped. And people were telling me, they're like, that's a crazy bill. There's no way they're going to do this. And I'm like, I don't trust that. I think that they're going to move this, actually. I've been told so many times that bill's crazy. So if you haven't seen this is also interesting for us at FPI, because we're a think tank and independent, small nonprofit. We've been around since 2015, but really published our first thing 2016. We're a fiscal policy group on left of center, progressive side, kind of the only progressive think tank in Florida. I think someone else asked me, it's like, who are the other progressive think tanks in Florida? I'm like, I'm not quite. There's other cool ones, but we're very specific in what we do. So when a bill like this comes up, it's sort of, we kind of enter the fray, and I want to share. So when the Rolling Stone magazine wrote about it yesterday, we saw that they printed extensively and quoted us, which was kind of cool for us. But they also talk about the bill in a very direct and good way, which is like, yep, this is what it is. It's the Foundation for Government Accountability, which is a right-wing think tank. Not even FGA isn't even really like a think tank. There's other think tanks that are right of center that actually publish things that are real, and this is not one of them. This is sort of like a sham think tank, and they're mostly to press on these anti-safety net, pro-child labor. They're funded by one billionaire, Uline, who makes cardboard boxes. That's the guy, and this is his think tank. So they wrote the bill for Cheney, and there's records of this, there are emails, and they wrote it for her. But very concerning to us is that since it's been moving from this right-wing think tank being pressured, and then the Republican sponsor, there's been industry jumping in. It's kind of like they created cover for then industry to go, yeah, we like this, yeah, okay, including the Florida Restaurant and Lodging Association, FRLA, which I'm more angry about them. Like the right-wing think tank, but FRLA, their prominent members include Disney, Universal, McDonald's, Burger King, any restaurant, essentially, any hotel chain, essentially, that is in Florida. All of them are members of FRLA, and their government affairs VP has spoken at both committees where it's passed out of, saying all of our members support this. This is great for business. It's very disturbing, to be honest, like some of her language. And we've been trying to reach out. And so that's something that's a lift for all of you as well. We might be shifting tack a little bit, especially on the child labor bill, because now the industry is a bit more coming out of the shadows to go, oh yeah, we support it. Say, no, you don't support child labor. in Florida. I'm sorry, without people saying, why are you supporting this FRLA and these major supporters of that? So there's other industry group, NFIB supported it today or yesterday, and then but essentially most industries are part of these associations, and all of them are filed on the bill. So that's what I'd say. One is, like, I think corporate accountability, especially with the most egregious pieces, people have seen what's happened to some, like Disney and everything, being engaged. And so even just to say, do you really want to step in it again? Could you? So, so I'll say that is where I spend most of my time at the moment, is on these child labor bills. There's two. There's another one that allows children, 16, 17-year-olds on scaffolding and on roofs, even though roofing is the most deadly job for kids, because you see it, and it's mostly undocumented kiddos who are coming here on their own, or and it's basically under the radar. And there's a great New York Times expose from about 3 weeks ago that has all these pictures. It's one of those like photo essay New York Times, and a quarter of it is in Florida. And they interview these kiddos on our roofs. And there's a bill that Senator Simon, it has a provision that allows them. So we want to sort of pull them all together and say, no, there's no rolling back of child labor protections in Florida. I don't, whether it's this bill on HB 49, yes, whether it's HB 49 or the which is around scheduling. And she amended it last night. They're feeling the pressure, and I was like, thank you for amending it, taking away what was possibly the worst part of it. So there is already some impact from just people really lifting up how terrible it is and engaging. So that's what I'm spending most of our time in. But let me see, there's some other stuff in education. Another major area that we'll see movement in the Senate especially, is on 7004. So 7004, did it move out of committee? Is moving, or I know that it's at least agenda'd. So, and I know that it'll pass. So it's Senator Simon's bill. It's a follow-up to HB1 last year. It was our universal voucher bill in Florida, which was it'll end up being a $4 billion bill, right? $4 billion in vouchers for Florida. But on the flip side, it said, hey, legislature, you guys should also try to figure out ways to deregulate public schools to make it fairer for them. And we agree to a certain extent. Like, we disagree about what that means and what I think a lot of y'all could imagine some of the regulations, like don't say gay and these stop woke and everything, and then the library bill, and you combine them, and it's this toxic mess for schools right now. What's happening? Those regulations are not included in the ones that they're proposing to take away. They're proposing to take away the 10th grade test, some of these testing ones, some very in the weeds stuff for school boards and for administration that are legitimate. I think, we've added so many things every year to schools, and this is true. But some of the most important things that are driving teachers from the classroom right now are not on the table. I'm trying to get my hands, to be honest, on so they did a survey. So HB1 last year said, okay, thou shalt do a survey, Department of Education, and ask Floridians, which regulations do you think we should get rid of? And so Floridians responded, and that survey, those answers, I'm trying to get a hold of it, because now agencies, our administration's agencies, don't respond to public records requests anymore unless you threaten to sue them or actually sue them. So I would assume that a lot of the answers to that survey would say, actually stop with the don't say gay in the library and all of these things. Like, those are the regulations that we think are onerous and bad for school districts right now, and driving away parents too. You're talking about choice, like that's an issue as well. So I know why they don't want to share it with me, but it's also because I asked, I guess. So anyway, there's that. There's some good things. The FBA supports a lot of it, and I think that there's a lot of good in 7004. I'm not really the title is scary, but it depends on your Yeah, yeah. So Elizabeth, we also did. So we totally agree. And then Jeb Bush's folks came out of the woodwork. I don't know where he was, where we're talking about regulations and accountability because no vouchers have any accountability. And now there's 350,000 kids. That would rival our biggest school districts, right? And they have zero accountability. So I don't know where he is with them, but he comes out of the woodwork to get rid of one of the best things I think that was in there, which was getting rid of the third grade. And that's what in the most recent committee that they got rid of was, and also Moms for Liberty piped up where apparently they don't like that kind of parental engagement or parental rights to allow your third grade to not be retained on that, which has had lots of issues. Yeah, with education, it is a positive thing, I think, for folks on here. It depends. School districts have lots of regulations. They don't like to be told what to do, and I understand that. But then on the other end, there's recess, right? So they had a proposal in it that said initially get rid of the requirement for 20 minutes of recess of play. We don't like that. Parents said, no, we don't like that, including probably some folks here. And I know Alliance for Public Schools, a couple of other partners. So they did get rid of that. So that stays in terms of a mandatory recess. So that's good. So that's moving. I'm not sure about the House companions. The House, they're supposed to do this via legislation from last year, but we'll see what comes of it. So there's that. I think broadly with vouchers, you'll see there is a like a cleanup bill proposed. And I mean, a cleanup bill as in some sort of some tweaks. I know homeschoolers want even fewer regulations than what they got last year. So they've been like coming back to the trough in a way to say, hey, we don't even like these regulations. But there's other things too, and we've been promoting more transparency, accountability. We have a lot of concerns about even the delivery of the Mondo voucher system that we have now, right? Which is $4 billion, which we don't even know, right? They haven't shared a lot of this data. They haven't shared any data on this. I'm flabbergasted, but anyways, it's a $4 billion part of our education budget now, which is about $25 to $29 billion, depending. So a huge chunk of it now is delivered via nonprofits. And it's these two nonprofits, the biggest one by far being Step Up for Students, the nonprofit that was stood up by a venture capitalist who's a big DeSantis supporter, but he probably support the next people, right? But he's, and they've expanded to lots of other states too, and big promoters of the universal voucher wave that you see across the nation now, because they like to get in and go, yeah, we like to cream the top off of this. One concern that we heard popped up in committee was Senator Roach was saying, hey, well, maybe we can have we can increase the percentage that they're called scholarship nonprofits. I forget the acronym. There's an acronym that we could have more of them in the system. And so maybe we should increase the amount that they receive. However, Step Up for Students already gets like $200 million because it's 3% of $4 billion. So he said, well, maybe 10%, because other states that have much smaller vouchers, we have the biggest voucher program by far in the United States now. We're the third largest state, may have universal vouchers. We will now be the biggest voucher state, and we have the least data about it, which is interesting, right? So there's no data and there's no clarity, and there's been lots of issues between the Department of Ed and the voucher delivery nonprofit called Step Up for Students, and there's not very much clarity around this. So there's lots of issues. If you care a lot about funding for public schools and just sort of preserving that and just thinking about our future there, we at the very least last session, and we were very involved in HB1 and lifting up the cost of that, and to say, we need to be thoughtful about that, because previous to last year, we've had a very large voucher program, especially since 2019. So we've had a big voucher program, and since from 2019 to 2022, it was funded in a way that kind of cannibalized out from your public school district. So had we not, here, buddy, you can come here. Had we not, anyways, I can also talk for them. Had we not shifted and actually added and had that conversation, and the way that they changed was called the FEFP, the Florida Education and Finance Program. They changed it and had the conversation up front around funding for vouchers. Had we not done that, it would have been complete disaster fiscally for every single school district. It's really tough right now for school districts, but because they actually added 4.2 billion to, when you add it all up, they added 4.2 billion to the current school year budget in order to pay for vouchers. Think about 4.2 billion. Hi, come here. Don't touch stuff. This is Leo. He's going to join us. He's my intern. Okay, so voucher costs, budget, etc. Hey, money. Okay, you want to go draw? And then there are a couple bills that are concerning us. I saw that y'all were talking a little bit about referenda and funding. There's a bill to add school district taxes levies into the homestead exemption, which would dramatically reduce, we think, about $1 billion across the state. It kind of changes with the different bills of money for schools, because obviously if you exempt the school levies, you'd get less money. So that's a concern to us. And then, yeah, I think that a big divergence that you'll see is Rep. Renner saying that he wants to tighten the purse strings, tighten his belt. We should tighten our belt this year compared to last year. Because we have the biggest budget that we've ever had by far, right? It's grown about 25% over the last 3 or 4 years. And, we're a big state, we're growing. And so that's a conversation, folks, that we should have. But there are projections that our revenues in the future, not that they will dip dramatically or that we'll have a recession in the immediate term, but that we'll have a little bit less than maybe we thought. So he's using that as an excuse to really tighten belts right now. I think, probably a little bit of political posturing to allow the governor to sign a smaller budget, because he kind of got raked over the coals for this record budget last session. So I'll stop there. Anything that folks had questions or wanted to talk specifically about, or anybody?
So Holly, I'm just going to jump in. There's a couple questions in the chat. I'm going to take them in order, if you wouldn't mind. So the first one is from Susan, and it is for HB 1197, which is the Early Child Care Universal Voucher Program, and establishes Early Child Care Universal Voucher and provides program funding, ELC, DOE, provider, student, and requirements, etc. So sometimes, as we know, the name and the content can be completely misleading. So I think she's asking, what do you think of this bill?
Okay, don't tell anybody, but we know a lot about this bill. We've helped a lot with this. So I'll go back to childcare a little bit, right? So you want some? Okay. So there are bills on either side of the aisle. This is the most comprehensive one, the most sort of audacious one, and I think the one that is very strategic on pushing the legislature over the fence, right? And using the fact that the Florida legislature last session, we just approved a universal voucher for K-12, right? And it's going to cost $4 billion. And so if you have a student in kindergarten, you can get $8,000 or more, depending if they have an IEP, but $8,000 to send them to private school. If you have a kid in pre-K, our universal pre-K only covers 3 hours a day, and that is equivalent about $3,400. If they're younger than that, you're pretty much SOL unless you're very low income in Florida. So it's a little bit of wait a second, why don't you use something that they did and go a little bit on the offensive for working families that have kiddos like this guy, and who are just dying from the cost of childcare. And that's actually, you know, broadly speaking, in Florida, out there, pre-K, there are a lot of public elementary schools that have pre-K, that have the VPK in there. It depends if they actually charge families or not. It depends, like, locally funding of it. You see different across the state, but mostly VPK is also delivered in a private way, and childcare is all private in Florida. So when you're talking about, what are you doing? Draw something. So it's a really clever way to kind of think about what? Right? Hi, buddy. Hey, I'm just chatting. I'm chatting with folks. Say hi. So it's clever, right? Because you think, how do you go on the offensive about saying, hey, y'all just used all this money. You found $4 billion for vouchers that we were not spending before. What?
So would it be fair to say
Okay,
you
go ahead.
support it, generally
Yes.
speaking? And then
Yeah,
I have Elizabeth Anderson who would like to speak.
okay.
Go
Hey,
ahead.
Holly. Thank you so much. So Holly and me and Rep Nixon and Nina were actually on the call together when we
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry.
devised this bill. So I wasn't sure if you knew that it was me, Holly, but in this wonderful group. I love BAM. These are great people. I'm so blessed to have all these activists here in my network. Sorry, I have a child too. And puppies, we fostered puppies for Christmas break. So I'm outside with them right now, but I wanted to make sure that everyone was aware that Rep Nixon is sponsoring this, since this is a homegrown person and we all love Rep Nixon here, but also because Moms Rising and I will also be working closely on this legislation to create some community organization. I wanted to bring it to everyone's attention here that you may be hearing more about ways that we can do some grassroots organizing around this here locally. So I just wanted to highlight that.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Yes. This was Elizabeth's idea. She was great. It was wonderful. She was like, wow. And I was like, that is brilliant. We got to do it, because it's timing too. So there are Republican, they know that there's something called the child care fiscal cliff right now in the federal, and Moms Rising is all over this. Rainbow Friends. So it's very timely, and there is interest. So it's sort of like, hey, we know that there's interest in sort of they want to do something, but we want them to go all out we really like to see full day VPK, have a really big investment to expand school readiness eligibility for 0 to 5. But so that's where Angie's bill kind of comes in, is kind of putting them in a corner and pressing on that. So folks really ratcheting up, hey, go big on childcare this year, because there is a lane of opportunity that we see, and there's a little bit of an appetite, like I said, especially in the Senate, but even in the House, there's a few bills, but it's like they need a little bit of pressure, obviously. But it's like, maybe it's that year that there's more of them in investment.
Great, thank
Thanks,
you for
Elizabeth.
that. And then also from Elizabeth, she wanted your thoughts on the 2024 HB1. Was that the 7004 that you spoke of, or is there a separate?
No, HB1, that was the one where, it's not really in FPI's lane. It's the one about banning social media for kids under 16. And like I said, the only thing that caught my eye was that Speaker Renner said, we want to, explain that there's a difference between children and adults. And then you go, yeah, well, in your own house, you were having these committee hearings where the sponsor of HB 49 goes, said that 16 and 17-year-olds aren't children. She kept saying that they're not children, they're youth workers. They're youth workers. They're not children. 16-year-olds.
On the plus side, if you get them into McDonald's, they can't go on social media.
I know. It's like, well, I guess if you're not on social, they could work more. I guess they don't want to be distracted by social media.
Exactly. Who needs a social life when you're working? Okay.
Yeah.
So that's just amazing. I know one bill that, and this may not be in your lane, that other groups have talked about, is the one that reduces the ability to get vote by mail kind of mid-election, is what's crazy about this one to me, because it would go into effect if it passed on July 1st, but there's already been a lot of pushback from SOEs, but it basically says, right now we have VBM on demand, but you could only get it if you were disabled or could prove you're out of the county, or if, I forget what the third one was, but do you have any thoughts on that and its chances of?
Yeah. My only thought, and I'd say like grain of salt, because sometimes it's like the leadership in the houses, in both houses, they'll say something and they'll be like, oh, don't worry about it, and then it passes. Like this has happened to us before, but they did poo-poo. So Senator Passidomo did, yeah, poo-poo. I meant poo-poo, not poo-poo. Okay, this is good. Poo-poo. Senator Passidomo did poo-poo that the other
Not
day.
wrong.
What saying that it was that that and the worst gun one I saw, but again, like because who knows, maybe she's willing to trade it for something, but I did see that, thankfully, but
Are you referring on the gun one? Are you, just for clarity, are you referring to the removing the 3-day waiting, having an automatic clearance if it's not approved
I
in
will
3?
find it right now. Let's see here.
Well, there's one to reduce the age for gun ownership from 21 to 18. That's pretty heinous as well.
Yeah, that was just put in place after Parkland, I think, so there.
Oh, I'm sorry. You know what? I was conflating these two articles. I'll put it in here.
And while
No,
you're
the
doing
near,
that,
the near total abortion ban one, and then the getting rid of VBM. Those are the ones that she said that she doesn't perceive an appetite in her chamber for, but
it feels like they're in a hole and their shovel broke and now they want a new shovel. I'm happy to hand them one. Keep digging, guys, keep digging. So let's open it up unless there's any objections. I don't have any other questions in the chat. So we're a small enough group that we can informally take questions, but I would just ask that you raise your hand so that, because I can't see everybody. Yeah, there we go. Anyone have any specific questions for, oh, here we go. So the first one I saw was Joy.
Actually, it's more of a comment. I was on a call several weeks ago, the Florida Voices for Health, and the what was the organization's name? The ARC of Florida. They were doing a report on the 2022-2023 budget, the finalized budget results. And they discovered that money that was allocated to the agency for people with disabilities and other groups serving this population was sent back into the general revenue and to our budget reserves. And they said, and this is from their report, that had that not been done, $789 million could have been used to help the families that are on the developmental disability wait list, the 22,000 plus families. So my question is, oh my God, how could that happen? And number two, when I saw Governor DeSantis's budget that he just proposed with another $16.3 billion in reserves because we're so fiscally prudent, I'm trying to figure out how does that make sense when we have 22,000 people scrambling, trying to take care of their families with DD on the DD wait list. And I'm sensitive to it because we had JJ and Allison Holmes. Nancy, remember they came to visit us in November, and you can't but feel you feel JJ and his family. JJ is 19 years old and is praying his parents don't wear out, so he's not institutionalized because there's nobody to take care of him after if his parents die and they're in their 60s plus. So my question to you is, one, is there any conversation about this misappropriation of budget money that should be going to these families? Because that seems like a lot to me, and a lot of money in our reserve when we have families that are suffering out there and other needs.
Yeah. And that issue, it wasn't even money, it was incompetence, right? So it's incompetence around understanding the way that budgets work, kind of. Sweetie, please. Don't mute me, okay? It's actually the rate. So I was talking a little bit earlier about Medicaid reimbursement rates. And it's sort of like if you have $1 million, but you can only dole it out to go purchase iPhones, and you will only want to purchase each iPhone for $5, but you have $1 million to do it, but you're saying, oh, but I'm only going to buy each iPhone for $5. You're not going to spend any of that money, right? Because you're never going to find an iPhone for $5. And that's why they have so much money left over, is because essentially, well, you could have just shifted, and that's the idea of shifting the rates and sort of reimbursement and that's like a very rudimentary analogy, but that's what's happening with that. And the fact that they had to we didn't spend money, and so therefore the feds aren't going to reimburse too. So that's the thing with Medicaid. So you didn't spend it. So in my analogy, it's essentially, okay, and you didn't spend your $1 million, so someone was going to match you, and if you spent it, and they're not going to match you. So I know that there's discussion around it in the legislature. That's a lot of it's an administrative problem, and administratively just saying, hey, this is an issue, and like seeing ahead of it. So there's a lot of problems right now. There's issues with the redeterminations for Medicaid. FPI is really engaged there. So the Florida Voice for Health is a key partner of ours. Scott Darius is my co-chair with me on the ballot initiative for Medicaid expansion. So we partner with them and other health partners on a lot of policy issues. And it's like this pairing of incompetence, to be honest, and then also sort of ideologically, well, we don't want to spend more money. But in this, that's why it's more of a not understanding how the budget works and the budgeting. And he said that on the committee, or in Scott's discussion around that. I think next session you'll see some movement there. Speaker Perez will be working on it. We know that. So hopefully speaking to it and holding them accountable and say, this is incompetence, right? It's not even like you've had the money. Why not? And is it about, okay, so if you pay more, at least you could get more money out the door and serve more people that way. Even though it sounds counterintuitive, but it's not. So there's so many examples of this right now. I could go on for 2 other hours of how much money we've left on the table federally, or kind of issues that we've had administrating things and having people not participate. That is no, sweetie, yeah.
Carol, you're the next that I see.
Yeah, I just wondered, Holly, thinking of us as a, grassroots advocacy group, people who care about progressive issues across the spectrum, could you give us some advice on ways that we can be effective advocates? Or, from your perspective and seeing what influences our elected officials during the session, what should we be doing now, either for around specific bills or specific issues that would have an impact?
Sure. I think and y'all are pretty savvy. I think it's not like a 101 sort of thing, right? But I think it's hard to be honest. Like I think that there's like the standard actions, and then you go, what's shifting behavior now? I think a tangential, indirect strategy that we're going to try out, and we've shared this before with y'all before the call, around really leaning on a couple of corporate powers that seem to be connected to some of these issues, or if they're supporting it, to try to lean on it. And I think that there is a little bit unexpected for them. And I've actually already seen some positive response. So for the child labor bill, for example, reaching out to really in-house lobbyists for different corporations and using the words reputational risk, right? They're all about reputational risk. Yeah. I feel like everyone should have to try to make sense and talk while a child is kicking them. That should be like your test, right? Do you know your stuff? Can you talk about it? The child is kicking you.
But that
So
makes
anyway,
sense on that one,
yeah.
you know, that the companies that would take advantage of hiring, you know, basically children to work, you know, it would be fairly easy to call them out as individuals and as a group that we could actually do that and say this group, whether it's McDonald's or whoever, is supporting this bill because they want to get cheap labor at the
Right.
expense of-
McDonald's is directly supporting it, right? So McDonald's is part of the Florida Restaurant and Lodging Association, and their rep spoke out vocally. It was not a secret. She spoke out vocally at both committee hearings. And she needs to get more, you know, like Disney's a part of their part, but then also McDonald's, you know, Burger King, essentially any group. It's kind of hard. Sometimes you have to Google and figure out, but a lot of them have shared the SEC if they're part of these associations. And then you go, you're part of association. Are you being vocal about it? And then just making that case.
But I mean, there's almost a direct relationship with child labor, obviously, and employers. But what about other things like, I mean, voting rights, democracy, DEI, the book banning? I mean, is there still potential for trying to work on corporate or business alliances around those issues?
I think it has to be. Yeah, absolutely not. It's not how we do them. Here. Do you want to sit on my lap or not? It's unacceptable. No. So I think it has to, it's just related to each issue, right? I actually, you know what I could share with y'all too is I put together for FPI, and it depends who you are and what your voice is, right? So we're working with some youth, and I was speaking to some local youth here in Sarasota, some high schoolers, and they have the ability to, they have the ability to do stuff that we can't, right? So whether that's being a little bit more vocal, okay, doing more actions like direct action. Whereas if you have a little bit more normal channels or a voice like FPI, where sometimes we just share the impact of a bill in the press, and that's just helpful to kill something, right? So it depends who you are and sort of what. I would say honestly, like letters are helping. I threw in here into our Action Network page. The legislators have been talking about this bill in particular. I've gotten so many letters about it. And you see, we've only done 300 letters across the state, but even letters to legislators and phone calls on just in a timely way. So if you have a bill that you're choosing, see which committee it's in and when it's coming up. And if there's 30 of y'all, even making phone calls to one org, it could just, or to the chair of the committee, to staff, etc. I think it's an underutilized tool in Florida to a certain extent of kind of flooding with outreach in that way. Press conferences that are out of the box, things like this.
Yeah, that's helpful. Okay, and Susan, for our last question, go ahead, please.
Yes, I was one, and I think it's outrageous that they won't tell us about that survey on what suggestions teachers and parents wanted to decrease regulations for the public school. So I hope you can get that information and maybe get the Washington Post or somebody to help you sue the state to tell you, because it doesn't seem like I mean, maybe I'm missing it and you could expand on this. It didn't seem like they really reduced much regulations for the public schools. But what I wanted to ask specifically was about, it's another bill that Representative Nixon sponsored in the House and Senator Davis sponsored in the Senate. It's SB 748, and it will require charter schools to tell school boards how they're spending our sales surtax money, which right now our school board in Jacksonville is afraid to ask them. So I wanted to know if the Florida Policy Institute supports that bill.
I haven't taken a look at it. Can you shoot it over to me? And we will.
In the
In
chat, or
general,
want me to send it to
yeah,
you?
yeah. Could you send, if you send it to Carol, she'll get it to me. In general,
Okay.
we oppose preemption, right? Or there's lots of preemption everywhere in Florida. They're also trying to preempt lots of good local labor regulations. So, it sounds similar to that.
Okay.
There's
I-
one, there's one in Orlando happening as well with the tourism taxes they're trying to, but yeah, I think in general preemption, we're trying to oppose it more, you know, in other areas as well, but would be happy to take a look at it.
Okay, great. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, Holly, so much. I know it's been a bit of a challenge for you tonight. We really appreciate you taking the time, speaking with our group. It's always good to hear your perspective. You're living and breathing this for years. And frankly, the fact that you do this day in and day out, you have my utmost respect because you know, you're really in the trenches. You should be getting battle pay. I hope you do. Um,
Thank you.
anyway,
I would lift really quick that we are kicking off the petition collection for Medicaid expansion in
Mhm.
February. And so would love to send that information to Carol too.
yeah, we can get that out to everybody. That would be wonderful. We love petitions, right, guys?
Yeah. So we have, you can see on the screen, the website for the Florida Policy Institute that has a whole list of issues as well as Holly's contact information. But thank you, Holly, very much for struggling through this. Thank you. We do have a couple of announcements and opportunities that we wanted to share with you quickly before we close. BAM has just posted its 2024 legislative priorities. I want to thank Judy Shecklin and Jane Cossett for all their work on going through the We the People document, which I think most of us are familiar with, that coalition that developed a whole series of legislative priorities around 5 issues and actually identifying priorities that are relevant to the kind of issues that BAM cares about. Whoa, hello. So please check that out. It's on our website under the 2024 legislative priorities, and we'll use this to guide our advocacy efforts. So again, we're very excited about that.
And just
Nancy, you want to talk about?
Yeah, sure. And just a hats off to Joy Burgess and you, Carol, for all your efforts on that document. It was a labor of love, and I really am so, you know, grateful to both of you. I've shared it with other groups to good acclaim, and I think it's making a difference. So briefly, HD 35 is undergoing a special election because the Republican who was there was made dean of some right-wing college. So this gentleman, Tom Keene, won the Democratic primary narrowly, but he won. And I personally have donated to him, I think, a little bit of money for this small district. I think they're expecting somewhere around 30 or 40,000 people to vote. So they've already made a ton of phone calls. A small amount of money makes a big difference. And they are doing phone banks with him Friday at 5, Saturday at noon. Actually, it says 2, but I believe it's at noon. And then Sunday at noon. And you can sign up, just go to Mobilize. You can look up Team Frost. You can look up Tom Keene. They'll be there, and I'm signed up, and I hope you consider doing that. His election is in 5 days. So this is kind of the last big push. And from my understanding, they think there's a real chance. Biden did win this district by 5 points. And then the next slide, I think, has, oh yes, for those of us who agreed a long time ago and it didn't seem so early, to be at the Prime Osborne Center at 7 a.m. for the Unity Breakfast. And this is huge because I don't know how many years, maybe someone knows on this call, Judy, but for maybe 4 or 5 years now, they've not been together, the NAACP and the Urban League, Jack's Chamber. So we're all together, and that's really, really cool. So it's at Prime Osborne. My understanding is there's only individual seats left. And then on Monday, come on out for the MLK Day Parade. It's free. Show up around 8:45 at Lot J and look for us. You'll find many familiar faces. You can decide who you want to walk with. It's always a really fun time, seriously. So Judy said 5 years. Elizabeth said 8 years, so I don't know. Anyway, it doesn't really matter. It's a big deal. And we all want to just tell our mayor how very grateful we are for her courage and leadership. So I hope to see you all out at the parade, if not at the breakfast. Oh, we have one seat. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say if anybody has any announcements, but I wanted to give some time to Judy Shecklin because Jack's Now has also adopted their legislative priorities and is also tracking bills. So if there's anything she wants us to pay particular attention to or share with us, that would be great, Judy.
Okay, yeah. So, you know, a lot of the bills that were mentioned are ones that we're looking at. You know, we kind of have a broader focus, so it's not just education and you know, the areas that Holly was talking about. So just real quickly, you know, of course, there are some good bills with the Republican supermajority. They're unlikely to pass, a lot of the ones that are being promoted by Democrats. But, you know, we're excited that there are some economic justice bills like raising the minimum base pay for full-time teachers. We may actually see that because Governor DeSantis has been hyping that. And, you know, that would be really positive. Another one, which is unlikely, but we've seen before, is paid parental leave. Again, DeSantis is really touting being, you know, family focused and parent focused. So, you know, I don't know if this really has any legs, but it would certainly be wonderful. We have some really bad bills in the LGBTQ arena. We thought we were finished last year, particularly since DeSantis has not seen this be popular on a national level, you know, with his presidential campaign. But there is another Don't Say Gay bill, only it is geared toward the workplace, and it would forbid any information about training on DEI, and it also makes it illegal to talk about, you know, your gender identity or pronouns if they're not what they were at birth. So that's, you know, of course, a real concern. And then, of course, we have our own Dean Black, who has a trans denial bill, which would basically make it illegal to have any sort of ID cards that are not the same as, again, your racial, your sex at birth, and using the word sex rather than gender. You know, I want to just mention real quickly the two bills we've all been hearing about. Again, Dean Black, he just really can't do enough bad things. That protection of historical monuments, because of course that's all familiar to us. We were just fortunate enough to have one removed by our wonderful mayor, but of course he will penalize leaders who do this, and it would be retroactive, and it's extremely punitive. And that's HB 395. Also a bill that bans reparations. Again, we're in the area of racial justice. And then again, one of our own local representatives, Kian Michael, is having a very mislabeled bill called Required Instruction in African-American History. But basically this required instruction is just focusing that Democrats were the ones supporting slavery, you know, 200 years ago, which is, you know, very not relevant to Black history. And there is a good bill on academic freedom, again, looking at this area, which would completely undo a lot of the restrictions being placed on colleges on collective bargaining by teachers and a lot of, you know, the curriculum restrictions. So, you know, and I know, Carol, you worked on some voter rights things. I don't know if there's anything in there that you wanted to mention I believe Holly mentioned some things about the vote by mail. I don't know if there's anything else. We're very, very concerned about the child labor that was mentioned. I really believe we need to have our voices heard loud and clear on that. Those are really dangerous movements backwards in protecting our children, and so very hypocritical. So thank you. There's 1,600 bills, so we won't go into any more.
That's right. Well, I think that about wraps it up, but we want to thank everybody for taking the time tonight to join us and hear Holly's take, but also to get the date of our next meeting on your calendar, which is March 14th. And that's going to be a joint meeting with Indivisible Mandarin. As many of you know, we actually received a little bit of funding from National Indivisible to do more collaboration with our sister progressive group across the county. So we'll come up with a great program for you. I know we have some ideas, and be meeting together on March 14th. So unless there's anything else, we can let you go for the evening. But thank you again for joining us.
And thank you, Rachel, for running.
Yes.